Chapter 7. Plantation Life.
Seth, it's your turn to hide,
said Laura, Helen, and Joseph.
We'll count to 33, and then we'll add on 5 more seconds.
The oldest child, Laura, added confidently.
Okay, turn around now. Don't peek, said Seth.
Laura, Helen, and Joseph turned their backs while Seth ran to hide. So far, none of the children had hidden in the wagon. Seth ran to the wagon near the barn and hid under a giant piece of sackcloth. Seconds later, the 3 children yelled,
"Ready or not, here we come!"
Seth lay perfectly still in the wagon that was used to transport sacks of rice to town. He could hear the 3 children running here, there, and everywhere, searching for him. This was fun. Slave children rarely had time to play. The children looked in the barn, in the cook's kitchen, and in the chicken coop, but they did not think to look in the wagon. After a while, the 3 children gave up and began to call to Seth.
"Seth, we can't find you. You can come out now,"
they called together. But Seth did not come out. Seth was so snug and warm lying underneath the sackcloth that he had fallen asleep. When Seth did not appear, the 3 children ran off together to do their chores. They all knew that if Seth did not come out soon, he would get into a whole heap of trouble. All 4 children were slaves who lived on a large plantation in South Carolina in the year 1715. It was called the Walker Plantation, and Mr. Walker was the plantation owner. The main crop grown on this plantation was rice. Rice is a type of grass. It is a very important food crop. Many African slaves had grown rice in Africa and had brought this knowledge with them to the English colonies. Life on the plantation was hard. Slaves worked long hours. They had to obey the plantation owner. Even though he was a child, Seth also had many chores. Seth had fallen asleep, thinking about his 2 older brothers. They did not work on the Walker plantation anymore. Both of them went to work for a neighbor who had a tobacco plantation. George, the older of the 2 brothers, had been allowed to visit when their mother became sick with swamp fever. Because they had gone to work on a different plantation, it was difficult to visit. Seth and his parents had been so happy to see George. Even though she was sick, their mother had made cornbread to celebrate. During that visit, George had told Seth that working on a tobacco plantation was not the same as working on a rice plantation.
"On a tobacco plantation, slaves work from sunup to sundown,"
George had said.
"You have no time off. You have to tend to those tobacco leaves all the time. When one job is done, another one comes along before you know it."
Seth didn't like the sound of that one bit, and he hoped he didn't end up growing tobacco. On a rice plantation, the slaves had certain jobs to do. When they were finished, they could do the chores that they needed to do for themselves. Although slaves on a rice plantation spent less time in the fields, it wasn't true that life on a rice plantation was easier than life on a tobacco plantation. Growing rice was a dangerous business. Rice grows in water. Slaves had to spend hours in swamp-like fields tending to the rice crops. The rice crops and the slaves weren't the only things in the water. There were snakes, alligators, and disease-carrying insects, too. That's how Seth's mother had become sick with swamp fever. The sound of a dog barking woke Seth. He had been asleep in the wagon for several hours. When he peeked out from under the sackcloth, he saw that the stars were twinkling in the night sky. He could smell wood burning in the cook's kitchen. He could hear the sound of bullfrogs calling to each other in the night air.
"Boy, am I in trouble,"
said Seth out loud as he jumped down from the wagon. He crept through the darkness toward the small wooden slave house that he lived in with his mother and father. First, he would get a talking to from his parents. Then, if the field manager had noticed that he had not shown up to work in the rice fields, he might be in big trouble. Seth peeked through the cracks in the walls of his house, the same cracks that let in cold air during the winter. A candle burned on a rickety table, and in the candlelight, he could see his mother sewing his torn pants. Maybe she'll be too tired to be angry, Seth thought to himself as he pushed open the door and then closed it behind him. It will be a long time before I get to play with Laura, Helen, and Joseph again, Seth muttered as he faced his mother. Do you think Seth's mother will be angry with him? Do you think the field manager noticed Seth did not show up to work in the rice fields?